With more and more Democrats expressing concern about President Biden's strength at the top of the ticket, the fundraising for down-ballot candidates continues to set new records. NBC News reports that House and Senate Democrats are pulling in record campaign cash as they confront a bitter fight for control of both houses of Congress. Let's bring in NBC's Ali Vitale on Capitol Hill. Ben Camisare, NBC News political reporter, and Adam Gentleson, a Democratic strategist who served as chief of staff for Senator John Fetterman. Okay, Ali, break down the fundraising numbers for us.
Well, look, out of the Democratic House campaign arm, which has the goal of flipping the House of Representatives this November, they pulled in a whopping $44 million in the second quarter of this year. That's a D-Trip record, according to them, and $19.7 million of that came in the month of June. The leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has been traveling the country. They point out that his travel schedule for fundraising has been robust and that they beat their Republican counterparts by both the June metric and also the overall Q2 fundraising metric. And look, this comes against the backdrop where we have spent a lot of time reporting on the panic and the concern within House Democrats and some of their most vulnerable ranks, specifically those so-called frontline Democrats that are in some of the swingiest districts in the country. Democrats will need to retain those as well as find places to expand the map if they want to flip an already razor-thin margin in their favor in November. But look, I listened to what Hakeem Jeffries told me for this story, where he says that now those members, quote, will have the money, the mobilization, and the message to win convincingly in the fall. And as we look ahead at the sort of dissonance that I've heard from donors in regards to President Biden's campaign and the way that they want to work towards down ballot races, the fundraising might be in a difficult place for the Biden campaign, but most donors I've talked to, even if they want to turn off the cash to the Biden folks, are still going to be funneling that money down ballot, especially to House races where people do really see this as a map that could allow Democrats to take back control of the House. That, of course, is the top priority for them here, and why this story, in a midst of, frankly, despair here on Capitol Hill, this story might be a bright spot for them.
Okay, so Ben Camisare, you're reporting on the quarterly fundraising boost where Senate Democrats are also raking in the cash, particularly in a few key races. You write, in all but one of the 10 competitive races, Democratic Senate candidates had raised more than their GOP opponents, pulling in a combined $90.6 million compared to $64.4 million for Republicans. The question becomes, is that fundraising advantage quieting vulnerable Democrats who have, at least privately, expressed worry about Biden being at the top of the ticket?
I think in short, no. I mean, think of it kind of in two ways. One, more money as a candidate. Every candidate wants more money. It allows you to run the campaign that you want to run within the you can control what you can control. And if you have the money to run the campaign you want, to run the ads you want, to do the persuasion you want, you can control that part of it. But then there's this whole cacophony of things outside here. Ali was talking about there's been this steady drip of, is Biden fit? Should Biden step down? A new Democrat came out in the past couple hours saying that maybe he should step down. This kind of optics, this national mood is not good for the Democrats. And on top of that, you're talking about the Senate race. Yes, the money that these candidates raise will be huge, but the battle for the majority of the Senate goes through states like Montana, West Virginia, and Ohio, and then into the Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona sort of swing states. I mean, those first three states are states that Trump won convincingly in 20. And so I think that there's still a lot of concern that no matter how much money, Democrats still have an uphill battle to keep the Senate.
Well, Adam, you know a thing or two about fundraising in key races, having worked on one of the most expensive Senate races in history for Senator John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. As Democrats rake in the campaign cash this cycle, I want to know from your perspective what it actually can buy them and if it can overcome the concerns if Joe Biden turns out to be a weak candidate at the top of the ticket. How much can money really buy you?
Well, it buys you a lot. There's sort of a point of diminishing returns, where you've raised enough money and then after that it doesn't count as much. But I mean, the main thing it buys you is television ads. I mean, let's just be blunt about it. Your biggest expense on a campaign is TV ads and then other forms of what we call paid media, which is, ads on social media and other platforms. And, that's your voice, essentially, when you're a campaign. And so if you have an issue where the top of the ticket is not as strong as you might like it, those ads are your opportunity to distinguish yourself and to articulate ways in which you are different from your party. And that's, that is a very common thing to do, not just in cases where the top of the ticket is weak, but in every race. If you're especially if you're in a state like Ohio or Montana, in West Virginia back in, I think it was 2006, when Senator Joe Manchin first won his seat, he famously shot a copy of a climate change bill with a rifle in one of his ads. So this is a tactic, but you have to have the money to put those ads on air. And I think what we're seeing with these numbers are that a lot of Senate Democrats are in reasonably strong positions to drive that message one way or the other as we approach the end of the summer and the real campaign season, which kicks in after Labor Day.
After Joe Biden's performance at the debate, a lot of Democrats who like Joe Biden, who wish the best for Joe Biden, were being cautious. They said, let's wait. Let's see what the polls show. Let's see what the fundraising numbers are. They say now, Adam, look at the polls. They still remain pretty static. Look at the fundraising that you're reporting. Do these numbers give Joe Biden a little breathing room?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. So the numbers at the top of the ticket have held steady. And I think that would be an argument for Biden to remain in the race. And I think he and his allies are making that case. I think part of the question that people are wondering is what converges with what? And it's impossible to say, right? Do the Senate numbers where because even though Biden is holding steady, he is still losing, and he's losing in many of these states where Senate Democrats are running. Senate Democrats themselves are ahead in those states. So which numbers converge with which? Do the Senate race numbers converge with the presidential numbers, or do Biden's presidential numbers converge with the senators' numbers? And I think what people are trying to figure out is which direction does this go? And there are lessons from history where generally the down ballot candidates converge with the top of the ticket. But a lot of people are making the case now that things are different, and what we call reverse coattails might be a factor here, where in fact the presidential numbers will converge with the Senate races. So it's hard to tell which way it's going to go, but that's the conversation that's happening in these circles right now.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.